Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back for Session 4, United We Stand, One Nation, One Destiny, the last session of today's event. We hope you are feeling inspired. It is my great pleasure to welcome back to the stage Imam Zaid.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. We ask everyone to please return to your seats as soon as possible so we can conclude with the final session of the conference today. May Allah Ta'ala bless all of you. There are a couple things. First of all, as you know, all of this, it costs money, and United for Change, as a fledgling organization, unfortunately doesn't have any money. So our conferences are sponsored. The first two conferences were sponsored by Islamic Relief. This third conference, you've seen the incredible organization, the beautiful props that you see here. We're going to talk about those briefly in a moment, by Zaytuna College. And so Zaytuna College foot the bill. And there's a lot of people. When we were praying, the whole hall back there was filled up with brothers and sisters. So for us to leave here without contributing collectively anything less than $200,000 would be unjust. So all of you, or most of you, should have the card with you. How many of you have the card, the pledge card for Zaytuna College? Raise your hand, please, so we can know. Okay. Almost no one. Listen, we want everyone, every single one of you, if you have a job, if you don't have a job, make a lot of dua, and we'll make a dua for you, to make a pledge or write a check for Zaytuna College. Put all your cash on the way. There'll be volunteers. Raise the card as the speakers are speaking very quietly. There'll be volunteers to give you the form and then to take it from you. Also, on the registration table on the way out, there will be a box. Volunteers from Zaytuna College, did you hear me? There will be a box on the table. You can drop it in on the way out. Now, give everything except $10. I want you to hold back $10. As you know, one of the letters, there are 3 letters. That's the second order of business. Before you leave, please sign those letters. A lot of thought went into them. They're professionally edited. One is to the Norwegian embassy. One, condolences to the people of Norway in the light of the recent catastrophe that they've experienced there. The second is to Eric Holder. Well, let's talk about the third. The third is to the families of the 9/11 families, just to express our sympathy and solidarity with them as we move towards this 10th commemoration of that tragedy. And the third is the letters to Eric Holder concerning the case of Afia Siddiqui, a lady, mother, who in one of the greatest, I can't speak for anyone else, travesties of justice in recent history, has been sentenced to 83 years in prison after being abducted, rendered to the United States in contravention to international law. The International Justice Network has done a report on her. This report will be on the table next to the letter. That $10 that you didn't give to Zaytuna College, buy one of these reports. Not just because the International Justice Network needs the money to print more of them, they do, but because it's informative and it lets you know about, as I said, one of the greatest travesties of justice in our time. And hopefully the more you learn, the more you will do, so that, as they said, they came for the communists. I wasn't a communist, so I didn't speak up. They came for the socialists. I wasn't a socialist, I didn't speak up. They came for the trade unionists. I wasn't a trade unionist, I didn't speak up. When they came for me, there was no one left to speak up. So they came for Afia Siddiqui, and unfortunately, many members of our community have not spoken up. And when they come for us, there might not be anyone left to speak up. But if we speak up now, they'll stop coming for people because they'll know that people are opposing injustice, are standing against it, and we will not stand silently in the face of injustice. So on the way out, as you go up, there'll be a table on your left. Sign the letters. We want these letters to have at least reflect the 2,000 some odd people here. And we want the organizers from the International Justice Network to leave with none of these, empty-handed. The book here, there are articles in here. Dr. Merve Kavachi has a reflection in here. Dr. Sherman Jackson has an article in here. There's an action plan, practical things you can do in here. Do not throw this away. Save this. Save this. There's valuable advice, inshallah, in here. Finally, and very quickly, so we can get on to the final session, Khitamhu Misk, inshallah ta'ala, the seal will be fragrant musk. This program is a volunteer effort. And to give you an idea of the passion of our volunteers, these beautiful flowers on the stage here, to buy them here in the Washington, D.C. area would have costed a few $1,000s. So 2 sisters bought them in New York for a couple $100s and drove them down here in their car. And with TLC, if you know what TLC is, tender loving care, because their hearts are as beautiful as these flowers. That's the spirit. We have over 100 volunteers. We want you to give all of them a round of applause for really pulling off a smooth, look how smooth the program. You didn't even know you went to pray. You just got up and you went to pray. Then you drifted back to your seats and you got a little bit to eat and drifted over to the bazaar, and everything's in close proximity. Registration came in smoothly, no glitches. So all volunteers, even the speakers are volunteers, because as I said, United for Change doesn't have any money, so we can't pay honorariums. So the speakers are here with rare exception on a voluntary basis. So give a round of applause to all the volunteers. But every group has to have an emir. And our emir is Brother Tariq Subhani. Brother Tariq Subhani, working full-time with 4 children and a wife, which means that he's busy 15 hours a day. Of the remaining 9 hours, 7 of those hours were spent for this program every day. I know because I'm texting him back and forth 2 in the morning. Well, 2 in the morning, his 2 in the morning. I'm in California, he's in New York. So 2 in the morning, my time, I don't know, he's whatever. In any case, the brother's been sleeping 2 hours a night for weeks, 3 hours a night. His health has suffered as a result. We refer to him as our captain. And so right now, the United for Change team has a little award for our captain. Right here. So he's totally surprised. So we have this award for Tariq Subhani, United for Change, and it says, in honor of your selfless work for being our captain. From Imam Zaid and the team. So come up here. Unfortunately, in the interest of time, you don't get a speech, but you do get the award and a photo op, inshallah. He doesn't get a speech.
Assalamu alaikum. Just want to thank Imam Zaid.
No.
This is a total surprise, total shock. Was not expecting this, so thank you to Imam Zaid. He's actually the real captain, the driving force behind all of this. We're just the worker bees. So Jazakallah khair, thank you so much for this, and I appreciate it. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
So once again, please, brothers and sisters, give something for Zaytuna College. $10, $5. There are 2,000 people here. If everyone gave $10, $15, $20, if 1 or 2 of you gave $10,000, inshallah, we'll be in good shape. Don't let the International Justice Network leave with a single one of these books. And they'll be on the table. Sign the letters. Enjoy the final session. What has been, I'm sure, an uplifting, inspiring, informative day. Assalamu alaikum.
Our next speaker is Dr. Sherman Jackson. Dr. Jackson is the King Faisal Chair of Islamic Thought and Culture, Professor of Religion, Professor of American Studies and Ethnicity at the University of Southern California. He received his PhD from the University of Pennsylvania in 1991. He has taught at the University of Texas at Austin, Indiana University, Wayne State University, and was recently offered a full professorship at Stanford University. From 1987 to '89, he served as executive director of the Center of Arabic Study Abroad in Cairo. In addition to numerous articles, he is the author of several books, including Islam and the Black American Looking Towards the Third Resurrection, and most recently, Islam and the Problem of Black Suffering. He is co-founder of the American Learning Institute for Muslims, a former member of the Fiqh Council of North America, past president of the Sharia Scholars Association of North America, and a past trustee of the North American Islamic Trust. He is featured on the Washington Post Newsweek blog on faith and is listed by Religion Newswriters Foundation's Religion Link as among the top 10 experts on Islam in America. Dr. Jackson will address the topic, United We Stand, One Nation.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي وقني شر نفسي وفلت لساني وأن أضل بغير حق رب العالمين وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I have a dilemma here because these lights are blinding me, but if I put my sunglasses on, I can't read my notes. So I'll have to try and, I hope you'll pardon my squinting and frowning, but it's not about you, it's about the lights. I've been asked to come and talk particularly about the business of us as Muslims in America and the whole enterprise of being American Muslims. And this, in a number of ways, is a rather difficult topic to talk about, particularly in the politically charged atmosphere in which we presently exist, and perhaps most especially in the context of this 10th anniversary of the tragic events of 9/11. It's difficult for a number of reasons. One, so many of the people who have come before me have said many of the things that reflected my own thoughts and sentiments on the topic. So in some ways, I feel that there's a limited amount of space to add much of significance and meaning. The second reason is that, quite frankly, we live in a time when there are forces in our society that are bent on denying Muslims a dignified existence in this land. And to that end, one of the ways in which they go about trying to pursue that end is by misrepresenting what Muslims say. And I think it is something of a statement on the invalidity of their cause that they have to spread falsehoods and misrepresentations in order to promote their cause. They come to events like this, they sit and listen, and then they distort what Muslims have to say, and particularly given the sensitivity of the topic of Muslim Americans, that kind of a talk is particularly susceptible to that kind of misrepresentation. And I'm saying this not from a theoretical point of view. I'm saying it as someone who has witnessed the way that my own words have been twisted and misrepresented on any number of occasions. But the big reason why this is a more difficult topic is that to speak about the issue of Muslim American identity is difficult in the sense that in doing so, one has to sort of navigate one's way through the perspectives, through the sensibilities, in fact, even perhaps the political agendas of at least 4 different groups. In other words, one is not just talking to a single group in which one can expect one's words to be heard through the prism of that group. Rather, one is talking to at least 4 groups, and therefore there are at least 4 different ways in which one's words might be understood, and therefore 4 different ways in which one's words might be misunderstood. And this is one of the challenges that comes along with speaking about this kind of a topic. And these disparate groups, to my mind, represent 4. The first is Muslims in the Muslim world, and one may wonder why one would pay any attention to the reality of the fact that Muslims in the Muslim world will be hearing this kind of a talk. But the reality is that these cameras, the internet, and other forms make it not only possible, but likely that these words will reach the ears of Muslims all over the world. And I think in this context, we have to remember the whole point of our being here. We are here to try to add understanding and healing to what is a very precarious situation for us all. And so it matters the perspective from which people hear what we have to say. And if we as Muslims in America speak in ways that reflect insensitivity, callousness, and an inability to take the perspective of Muslims in other parts of the world, then that is not likely to contribute positively to our ability to communicate across those lines. I'll talk a little more about that in just a minute. The second group that is listening to these kinds of talks about Muslim American identity is the group of the non-Muslims of the dominant group in America. And I'll say a little word about them in a minute as well. Third, we have Muslims in America, and this group is divided into 2 mindsets in this context. The first is that group of Muslims who, quite frankly, still nurse a number of reservations about this whole enterprise of being Muslim and American. On the one hand, they want to fully embrace this idea, but there are any number of issues that continue to stand between them and a full embrace of the whole idea of being American. And some of what stands between them has to do with some of the rhetoric that has been generated by some of the powers that be that confuse Muslims in terms of what their own position as Muslims in this country should be. So that's a third group of Muslims. That's a third group that I need to try to address. And the fourth group are also Muslims in America, but this group of Muslims doesn't have any reservations about being Muslim American. In fact, they have an overwhelming interest in being Muslim Americans, but in all too many all too many instances, their interest in being Muslim Americans is not matched by a principled engagement of what it actually means to be Muslim American. In other words, Muslims who are very much interested in enjoying the privileges and the rights and the opportunities that go along with being American, but who are far less interested in identifying and recognizing what their obligations are as Muslim Americans. So now, with that sort of landscape being set up out there, I want to try to say a word to each of these groups so that when I talk about the whole issue of being Muslim American, it's understood in the context in which I mean it. Because it is eminently important that if Muslims are going to proceed in American society and say that we are Muslim Americans, that sentiment has to be deeply and honestly felt. Because if it is not deeply and honestly felt, that hesitation will emanate to the people of the American society. They will know that you are speaking half-heartedly, and that will actually have the effect of undermining us as Muslims in this country. We have to be aware and honest about one thing. No one likes to be in the presence of people who lie to them and seek to manipulate them. No one likes to live in the presence of that kind of reality. And so it's important for us as Muslims that if we're going to say we are Muslim Americans, that we mean it, that we embrace it, that we're able to stand behind it, not on interest alone, but on principle, as Muslims who believe in the Quran, believe in the Sunnah of the Prophet, and who believe in that grand tradition of ours that is the Islamic tradition. So let me begin with the whole enterprise of the difficulty that goes along with the fact that when I say I'm a Muslim American, that there are Muslims in the Muslim world who are listening to me, and they hear this. And the problem in many instances is that, in my experience, many of our brothers and sisters in the Muslim world, when they hear us say that we are Muslim Americans, when they hear us identify with America in this or that capacity, the tendency is all too often to equate America with American foreign policy. And so if I say that I am an American, the tendency is to assume that somehow I either identify, condone, or am willing to whitewash American foreign policy. And I think here it's important for us to say that the very fact that I identify as a Muslim American does not at all entail, to any degree, the notion that I rubber stamp or go along with American foreign policy. It is very important for us to be sensitive to this reality, because when we come to an occasion like this, marking the 10th anniversary of the victims of 9/11, and Muslims in the Muslim world hear us stand here and offer our condolences, as we should, to our countrymen, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. When they hear that, and then they say, well, wait a minute, these Muslim Americans are talking about the people who died on 9/11, but they have nothing to say about 500,000 babies who died in Iraq because of American sanctions that were imposed on that country. They have nothing to say about the chaos, death, and destruction that have been visited on these countries as a function of American foreign policy. When Muslims hear this kind of presentation, and they are left with the sense that we as Muslim Americans, and the very meaning of being a Muslim American, suggests that we empathize with American tragedy, but we don't empathize with any other tragedy, what Muslims in the Muslim world are likely to say, if this is the kind of Muslims that America is breeding, then America can go to hell and she can take her little sellout Muslims with her. That's the mentality that is likely to come out of this. And for me, this is a concern, not because I want to placate misplaced feelings, but because it's important that we respect the feelings of people if we want to begin to communicate with them. We have to go to people where they are. They experience realities that suggest to them things about America, that leave them with a certain perspective on America. Then we stand up and identify with America. How does that bring them to look at us? And then how are we then likely to be able to communicate to them or with them in such a way that will bring greater peace, greater understanding, and a greater ability to understand America? We have a responsibility to be careful about the way in which we communicate. And this is why I want to say here that I am a Muslim American. And I love my country not as a government, but as home. This is, to me, home. And by the way, this is not an exclusively Muslim perspective. In fact, I was in the airport here in Washington, D.C. not long ago, and I saw a coffee mug. I think it was a coffee mug or a T-shirt. Of course, produced by non-Muslims, that said, "I love my country. It's my government that I'm afraid of." So there's a difference between loving my country and necessarily being in agreement with everything that my government does. And I think that we need to be clear about that. And Muslims in the Muslim world need to be clear about that. As Muslim Americans, we are going to strive to make positive contributions to American domestic and foreign policy. We may not always succeed, but just as it is not fair for me to expect you to disavow your country in the Muslim world simply because it has foreign policies that do not live up to our expectations, it is also not fair for you to ask me to disavow my country simply because it has foreign policies that do not live up to our expectations. We don't live in perfect countries. We don't live in perfect societies, but these are our societies. And a part of our charge is that we work to make these societies better societies, because this is home. This is where my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren are likely to die. And so I have a commitment in trying to contribute to the betterment of this society. And so again, when I say that I am an American, this is not a rubber stamp of American foreign policy. Moving on to the second group, and that is the dominant group of Americans who often abuse and exploit the Muslim's attempt to position his or herself in America as an American Muslim. These are people, and many Muslims fall victim to accepting this mentality. These are people who forget that America is a pluralistic society. And they therefore want to assume a monopoly over defining who is and who is not an authentic American. They want to say what an authentic American looks like, what an authentic American does, what an authentic American does not do. And many Muslims, unfortunately, accept their definition of what it means to be American, and they are alienated from it. Many Muslims are alienated from this. And so what we have to do is we have to be careful to make sure that we do not forget and that we do not allow our countrymen to forget, and women, that America is a multicultural, multiracial, multi-religious society It has been from the beginning, and that is part of the very meaning of the American project. And any one definition of what it means to be American cannot assume the right to impose itself on the rest of us as Americans. And the dominant culture in America today, and this is part of what is happening. You know, Islam is, what? Islam is just an excuse for many Americans who feel that they are losing control over the ability to define who is and who is not American. America is a lot browner than it used to be. America is a lot less Christian than it used to be. I don't mean that Christianity has fallen. I mean that there are other religious communities that have joined the American mosaic. And this is what America was always supposed to be. But there are forces in this country that as long as they felt that they were in charge, it was all right. But as soon as they looked up and they discovered that we now have to share this country with other people, that our sensibilities cannot automatically assume that they are the norm to which everybody else has to conform. We now may have to learn about other people. We now may have to adjust the way in which we interact with others in society. And this is very scary for a lot of people. And here's where Islam and Muslims become the latest easy target. And we must make sure that we Muslims, and this is exceedingly important, that we do not fall into the trap of seeing Islamophobia as an evil that is either directed at or affects Muslims only. Those who wish to deny Muslims a dignified existence in this country, they are operating not only against Muslims, but against America. Because America is not just James Brown, Imam Siraj, it's James Brown and Elvis. Huh? It's Aretha Franklin and Bonnie Raitt, and J-Lo for that matter. America is not a monolith. And, you know, there have been attempts, legal attempts, to try to control the makeup of American society. My time is limited, so I don't have time to really go into this, but let me just say this so that you understand what we're dealing with. It was not until 1965 that people from the Muslim world were even allowed to come to this country in any significant numbers. Prior to that, American law monopolized immigration so that the majority of Americans would remain Northwest European. This was an attempt to control who would always enjoy the presumption of being normal and American. And now the reality has changed. And we actually have to learn to live in a multicultural, a multiracial, a multi-religious society. And there are some in our country who are not prepared to do that. And they are acting out their insecurities on Islam and Muslims now. And Muslims have to be smart enough to always communicate to the broader society that if these people succeed in denying Muslims a dignified existence, they will not only succeed in marginalizing Muslims, but they will succeed in undermining America and what America always was supposed to stand for. And even, don't get me wrong, America has its downside. It has its failures. But these were the ideals that America was supposed to embody. Very quickly, let me move on to the third group. And I know I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to try and speed it up just a little bit. But very quickly, there are still many Muslims who say that, yes, I'm a Muslim American. And they say things like us and we. And some have even put flags up and stuff like that. and it still has a hollow ring. Doesn't ring true, because there's still some hesitation about this whole notion of being Muslim. And in fact, in so doing, they buy into the very rhetoric of those who wish to deny Muslims a dignified existence. Because what the Islamophobes are saying is that by definition, if you are a Muslim, you cannot be American. There is a fundamental contradiction between being Muslim and being American. Islam will not permit you to be an American. This is what the Islamophobes are saying. Some Muslims are being affected by that. And some Muslims are being affected by the fact that they don't know their religion nor their religious history very well. And because they don't know their religion and their religious history, they buy into this understanding, this essentialist notion of an Islamic culture. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf and I were having this conversation earlier. Islam has some universal values, no question about it. Modesty, generosity, caring, sharing, all of these are universal values. But universal values, in order for them to mean anything, have to be concretized in time and space. Manhood in America may not look like manhood in the Congo, what it means to be a man. The role of a woman in Japan may not be the role of a woman in South America. Femininity is an abstract concept, but it has to be concretized in time and space. And the point that I'm trying to make to you here is that some Muslims believe that Islam sort of superimposed a culture on society that was itself to remain unchanging throughout space and time. And so they buy into this notion of an essentialized, quote unquote, Islamic culture. Then they come to America and they find another culture. And then they are stuck with two choices. Do I recognize any aspects of this culture? Which means that I have to abandon Islamic culture. Or do I hold on to my Islamic culture and not recognize any aspects of American culture? Many Muslims are still gripped with this. Here I want to offer the following. And that is that, and this is part of the beauty, the genius, and the miracle of Islam. Islam has always been respectful of and in engagement with cultures wherever it went. What Islam does, it engages cultures on the basis of values. Not on the basis, do you look like the Arabians coming out of the Arabian Peninsula? That is not the criterion. It is, do your cultural norms coincide with values and principles that Islam recognizes? And in this regard, this is why Islam was able to go all over the world and indigenize itself. It was able to go to Egypt, to Iraq, to Syria, to North Africa, to Sub-Saharan Africa, all over the world, and indigenize itself. The people were able to engage their own cultural norms, and then to determine which aspects of those norms were consistent with this new religion that they had adopted and which needed to be modified. And this is the history of Islam. And part of what I want to communicate to you here and now is that Muslims have to get over this notion that that is a reality of the past. It is not a reality of the past. That is the reality wherever Islam goes. And if Muslims in the past processed the cultures that they encountered on the basis of the principles and sensibilities of Islam, there is no reason why that process should not continue in America today. And America has many, many good cultural practices, good social institutions, good ways of doing things. And there is no reason why Muslims should have any hesitation about embracing these and embracing these as their own. And the reality is that is exactly where the people who want to deny you a dignified existence want you to be. They want you to be afflicted with what Du Bois called double consciousness, where you have sort of half a heart in Islam, because you really want to be American, and you got half a heart in America, because you really want to be Muslim. You have this infisam shakhsiyya. You are torn apart. And the reality, all right, and the reality of this is most clearly and painfully manifested in our young people. It is most clearly and painfully manifested in our young people. And we have to understand that we cannot allow these false dichotomies to continue to define us as a community. We don't have to eat couscous. We can eat grits. What's wrong with grits? What's wrong with it? And ultimately, if we are successful as a community, we will reach the day where grits will be the cuisine that's served at Islamic Awareness Week on these college campuses. Huh? Because what we must understand is that as a Muslim community, look at our history. We are charged with doing the same thing. The Prophet ﷺ did not come to society and say, this is a kafir, non-Muslim society. It all has to go, and I'm going to replace it whole scale with something else. That's not what he did. Many aspects of pagan Arabia were looked upon as perfectly fine and accepted by the Prophet and became a part of the Muslim culture. So we have to understand this. Muslims have to get out of this dichotomous thinking. The last group, I'm not even going to finish this. The last group, but this is important. This is a group of Muslims in America who, they just want Islamophobia to go away. They just want to hurry up, accept us as Americans, and just accept us as Americans. And they don't really care how this comes about. If America would say, okay, we're not going to hate the Muslims anymore, we're going to hate who? Some of these Muslims will be willing to say, what? Okay. Because they just want this Islamophobia to go away. They are committed to their interests, and they have forgotten their principles. And when I stand up here and say, I'm a Muslim American, we should be Muslim Americans, they say, yes, yes, yes. But that's not what I mean. I don't mean being Muslim American without principles. That's not what I mean. And those people have to recognize that you share an important part of the responsibility for why we are where we are right now. Because the forces of Islamophobia that are unleashed on us today, they are not new. They were here when you came here. You recognize them. You recognize what they were doing to the blacks. You recognize what they were doing to the Latinos. You recognize what they were doing to other people, but it was somebody else's problem. So we didn't have anything to say about it. And now it's come home to roost. We cannot be unprincipled Muslim Americans. We have to be principled Muslim Americans. I had some more things to say, but I'm going to be a good guest. And I like the way they don't show a frowny face at you. They show a smiley face at you to get you to stop. I want to say one last thing. Muslims. These are trying times that we are living in. And the reality is that the future does not belong to the faint of heart. And if you want to talk about being a Muslim American, remember this. America is not only the land of the free, it is also the home of the brave. And if you're going to be a Muslim American, you have to be brave. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Imam Zaid asked me to tell you if you have any envelopes for Zaytuna, please leave them at the there's a box on the registration desk as you go out. It is my great pleasure to introduce Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, who is ranked as the Western world's most influential Islamic scholar by the 500 most influential Muslims. Sheikh Hamza is a co-founder of Zaytuna College and an advisor to Stanford University's program in Islamic Studies and the Center for Islamic Studies at Berkeley's Graduate Theological Union. He is one of the leading proponents of classical learning in Islam and is a widely recognized innovator in modern Islamic education. He has served as an advisor to many organizations, leaders, and heads of state. He has been interviewed in the media throughout the world and was the subject of a BBC documentary segment, The Faces of Islam, Ushering in the New Millennium. Sheikh Hamza has been a passionate and outspoken critic of American foreign policy, as well as Islamic extremist responses to those policies. He has drawn criticism from both the extreme right in the West and Muslim extremists in the East. He has authored numerous articles and research papers. His published books include, among others, Purification of the Heart, Agenda to Change Our Condition, and The Prayer of the Oppressed. Sheikh Hamza will be speaking on United We Stand, One Destiny. And your water is there.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalam. I know her husband very well, so don't worry. Alhamdulillah. He's a friend of mine. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Alhamdulillah, the problem with being at the end of a long day is that people, one, are tired because there's been a lot of speechifying and talking, and so the mind begins to wander. People are thinking about dinner and other things, but this is my fate today, is to be here. And I want to say a lot of what's been said were thoughts that were in my mind. So people articulated a lot of my own feelings. Certainly Dr. Jackson and Tariq Ramadan, also Dr. Ramadan's points about standing up for truth and recognizing that the us and them dichotomy is what can be referred to as a false dichotomy, to put you into these us and them categories and say, oh, we have to be either you're with us or you're against us. There are other options on the table. So I was asked to talk about where are we going, which is one of my favorite questions because it's a Quranic question, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ. It's also a Christian question, Quo vadis, where are you going? It's something we all have to think about. Obviously, that question can be thought about on a lot of different levels. It can be thought about on a metaphysical level. Where then are you going as a creature that is both spiritual and material, that has a soul but also has a body? If you ask it on a metaphysical level, the Quranic determination, the answer to that question is فَرِيقٌ فِي الْجَنَّةِ وَفَرِيقٌ فِي السَّعِيرِ. You're either going to bliss or you're going to dis, which is actually a nice Dantean word. You're going to the other place. One of the things that Charles Dickens said about France during the Revolution was it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And then he said we were all going to heaven and we were all going to that other place. I think this time that we're living in is the best of times, it's also the worst of times. And to ask the question, where are we going, depends on the individual. When people say to me, you're too liberal, and then I get other people say you're too conservative, I have to question the questioner more than his remark. Why are you too liberal or why are you too conservative? I have to ask the person, why do you think I'm too conservative or why do you think I'm too liberal? Because some people tell me I'm too conservative and other people tell me I'm too liberal, and you're going to confuse me. I'm just trying to be true to my own understanding. And if you blame me for that or challenge what's in my heart, you can't challenge what's in my heart, because by the grace of God, only God knows what's in the heart. Even the devil doesn't know what's in your heart. So when we ask the question, where are we going, we can ask it at a metaphysical level, but I want to look at where are we going at the level of being in finite bodies in this world, not the afterlife, because none of us can answer that question. As Muslims, I know that there's certain strains of Christianity that will say, we're definitely going to heaven, and they're all going to hell. And I've actually read in one Christian book about Islam, he said one of the worst things about Islam is they actually don't know whether they're going to heaven or not. Ask any Muslim, are you absolutely 100% sure you're going to heaven? And they'll say, I'm not. And they say, but thank God, because we're Christians, we know we're going to heaven. That's a different way of looking at where you're going. In terms of this country and where we are today, in some ways, we're so much better than we have ever been as a nation. Let me give you one example. African Americans, most of the African Americans in the United States today have ancestors that were brought to this country in chains. And this was not seen as something wrong or immoral, except by a very small group of British people and American, mostly Unitarians. There were pamphlets written by Jews, by Christians, not only justifying that black people were the accursed descendants of Ham, and therefore this was their fate, but that the Bible justified the conditions of slavery in the United States. That was not that long ago, people. In the 1950s, when Eisenhower was president, African Americans could not drink from the same drinking fountains as white people in many states in this country. It's hard for people here to imagine that, but there are people here that are alive today that don't know the history of this country. That's not old history, it's recent history. That most people of color in the United States of America 50 years ago had the option of being a janitor, a night watchman, a maid, a servant. These were the options. That is no longer the case. There is a man of color in the White House that was white for over 200 years. That house was white for over 200 years. So things have changed. To deny that change in this country, those positive changes, is to deny an aspect of America that is very important. So from that perspective, things are much better. That's just one example, and I could give many other examples. But from other aspects of the United States, there are very troubling signs going on in this country right now. Let me give you an example. In the FBI, they issue certain guidelines for determining extremists. One of the recent guidelines was if they talk too much about restoring the US Constitution, that's considered extremism or a sign of extremism, because there are certain peoples in this country that are very troubled by a lot of the rights in the Constitution and aspects of the Constitution that have been trampled upon. They're very troubled. The right to be free of illegal search and seizure without probable cause. The fact that people can now be patted down. I was in an airport and my 6-year-old child, I almost went to blows because I've got a lot of Irish blood. And I was in an airport and this guy wanted to pat my 6-year-old child down. And I told him, you're not laying your hand on that boy. And if you do, you better get your taser out. I'm telling you the truth. And he got very offended. And I said, look, I actually wrote a paper on pornography in this country, and I know the statistics of pedophilia. And I'm not accusing you, but I don't know you. You are a stranger. And when I was a kid, my mother told me, watch out for strangers. So I don't want you touching my child. Now, if you want to bring a lady out here, if she has to check a 6-year-old boy, then I'll let you, because statistics show women don't molest little kids. They might aid and abet a molester, but they don't do it, because that humanity is still intact. For me, that is a complete, gross, and egregious trampling of my right as a parent to protect my child. What kind of a world are we in when a 6-year-old has to be patted down? What kind of experience is that for a 6-year-old child? People don't think about these things, but this is the world they're growing up in. When I was a young boy, the whole family went to the gate in the airport. You remember that, Imam Qasim? Imam Zayd? Imam Siraj? That was the America we grew up in. You went to the gate to see your family off. There was no, you didn't have to stand in front of a machine that was going to basically undress you for some stranger to look at you. Now, let me give you an example of the problem of wealth in this country. I was with a group of very wealthy Saudi Arabians, and we went to a private airport in the United States of America not that long ago. This was a few years ago. We got onto a private jet. Our baggage had no check. We didn't have to put them through any machines or anything. We just got on the plane. And I'm thinking, here's Saudi Arabians, because they have a lot of money, they can hire private jets, and they don't have to go through any of this security. What does that say about our country? What does that say about our country? We have so many contradictions in the United States, and until we as a people start dealing with the contradictions of this country, the disparities between the powerful and the powerless, between the enfranchised and the disenfranchised, between the rich and the poor, until we start really looking at who we are as a people, we are not dealing with reality. We're living in bubbles, and those bubbles will eventually burst. Like they've bursted in places like Syria. Gaddafi now, he's watching television and he's saying, who are these people ripping up my picture? They love me, my people love me. Because every time he went out, Zanga Zanga, every time he went out, they would all clap, Gaddafi, Gaddafi, and he's just eating it up. They love me. And then he had around him all these people saying, Wallahi yuhibbuka. الأخ القائد يحبك الشعب يحبك. You see, this is the delusional state. Bashar Assad is in this delusional state. They don't understand what happened. Hosni Mubarak was surrounded by people. Wallahi يحبك شعب المصري. قوي جدا يحبك. And this is what and then he's shocked. He doesn't, and then he gets up, my people, my people. Opening his arms, thinking that they're going to all go home. This is the delusional state that these people are in. We have people in power today that are in delusional states. When Barack Obama says that arugula, the price of arugula has gone way up. You see, this is a man he's living in a different world from somebody in East Oakland or South Central LA. He hasn't even visited any of these places. He's living in a different world, and he's surrounded by people living in different worlds. This sets up a situation that leads to revolution. If you read history, this denial of the suffering of common people, when you have bailouts in this country of hundreds of billions of dollars for private bankers and individuals losing their houses because those private bankers tricked them. Now you look at this, because this is completely haram in Sharia, but let me give you an example. The FBI had recognized this long before 2008, because the FBI does good work as well. They do. They do good work in certain things, and in other things, they have problems. They're a human institution. But in something, Muslims, there's all these, horrible government and this and that. But when the house gets robbed, 911. Can you send some police over as quick as possible? I've just been robbed. You see, people, this is human nature. These banksters, what they did was they would have somebody go and they would say, oh, this house is worth $800,000. And it wasn't. It was worth maybe $400,000. And then they would loan a person the loan. They would loan them the money, $800,000. And then they would take several of these loans and they would put them in a package, securitized debt. And then they would sell this debt to the farmers, to the retirement of teachers' funds, to the firemen's funds, as AAA loans, even though they knew that these were subprime loans and that they were very, very susceptible to collapsing. But that's why, who cares if the same rating institution that downgraded the United States, those were the same rating institutions that were giving AAA loans to subprime securitized debt. The same institutions. You think I trust them? AAA, AA, single A, C, B, D, F, they've all failed us. They say too big to fail, but the reality of it is they were too big to jail because they're too powerful. This is the reality. But the average American is suffering and they're being told, you're the problem. You're the problem. Muslims are the problem. Oh, the boogeyman over here, it's all their fault. You see, this is what's going on this planet. This is what's going on. People are being hoodwinked. They're being fooled. And if you look, he says, what is relevant for both Muslims and Americans in terms of where we're going? Muslims and Americans assumes already that there's some difference between Muslims and Americans. No, what is relevant for Muslims living in America, as well as the population at large? Because I'm an American. I'm as American as apple pie. I'm serious. I'm sweet too. But I am as American as apple pie. My ancestor on my mother's side, 1764. My Irish great-great-great-grandfather came here, fought in the Continental Army with Washington as a lieutenant. This is all, I can prove this. I can be a son of the American Revolution if I wanted. George Bush is also a member of that institution, so I haven't applied. Because, it used to be a patriotic institution. But I'm as American as apple pie. 1838, my grandfather migrated to Philadelphia, up the river, coming into New York, going up. My grandfather on my mother's side, from her paternal side, 1896, Ellis Island. So the whole spectrum of experience is there. The only one, I didn't come as I embraced Islam so I can relate to the post-1965 immigration, because I didn't know it at the time that I was joining an oppressed American minority. But now I know that I'm part of an oppressed American minority. So I have the whole American experience, except the African American experience. But I have a connection with that experience because my mother was, and Imam Zaid knows this because he knows my mother. My mother was very, very involved in the civil rights movement. When I was a little kid, I was marching in marches with my mother in the civil rights movement. My mother is in the 1964 Encyclopedia Britannica's yearbook. There's a picture of her holding up a placard at when the Republican convention was happening in San Francisco, and she was there. Everybody in the crowd is African American except my mother and my older sister. And she's holding up a placard that says civil rights is the issue. So that's the stock that I come from. My mother was involved. She followed the program. Civil rights, anti-war Vietnam, feminist rights, and then the environmental. She was in environmentalism in the late 60s. We were recycling in my house in the late 60s. So it's not new to me going green. My mother was green before people had a term for that. So that's the America that I come from. It's an America of struggle. It's an America that acknowledges that this thing began in order to form a more perfect union. People don't like that. They say it's not grammatical. How can something be more perfect? But the point of that rhetorically is that this is a work in progress. And Dr. Abdul Hakim Jackson talks about this a lot, which is important, and that is the fact that America is being negotiated constantly. We are in negotiations. It is a give and take. Let me give you an example. Right now, you see, and part of my problem is because I was told, my mother taught us as kids that a mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. So I was taught to be open-minded. And that's probably one of the reasons I was able to accept Islam, because I wasn't taught to be prejudicial towards other faiths. I was taught that other faiths are good. They have truth in them. That's the way my mother raised us. But my mother told us, always be open-minded. Always listen to another's argument before you condemn it or judge it. That's what I was taught. So I read Noam Chomsky and I read Pat Buchanan. And I agree with Pat Buchanan sometimes. I disagree with him other times. I agree with Chomsky sometimes. I disagree with him other times. Because I'm in dialogue with the books I read. If you see my library, there's markings on the side. What is he talking about? Couldn't agree more. Because I'm in dialogue with the books I read. That's how I was raised. That you have to think and you have to process. And sometimes, if something bothers you, you have to ask yourself, why is it bothering me? Why is it bothering me? Because sometimes something bothers you because it's something you haven't dealt with inside yourself. You see, you don't like to hear it because it might be too true. Now, in the United States of America, we have a major problem in this country with how Americans are looking at terrorism. Just a few examples. When a man who was rational by all accounts, all of his friends said he was rational, he had an engineering degree, he was very intelligent, high IQ, had made a lot of money. When he flew his private plane into an IRS building and left a note as a political protest, this was an act of political protest, they said, this is a madman. But when Lieutenant or Captain Hassan kills the people down in, this is obviously a conspiracy. He was in contact with somebody in Yemen. He wasn't a madman. You see, this psychiatrist that was in the army. When a man in Northern Europe plans for 2 years to bomb a building in Oslo and then kill all of these multiculturalists, and he does it with a political screed that he writes, justifying this and quoting many, many Islamophobes from around the world, including the major ones that are here. When he does that, he's a madman. That's all, he's just a madman. So why is it that when these hijackers hijacked these planes and drove them into, why weren't they mad? What's the rationality behind that reasoning? Either they're all terrorists or they're all madmen. But let's have a standard that is based on some kind of rational criterion. Because from my perspective, it's madness. We're living in a time, one of the Arab poets said, إِنَّ لَفِي زَمَنٍ لِفَرْطِ شُذُوذِهِ مَنْ لَيْسَ يُجَنَّنُهُ فَلَيْسَ بِعَاقِلِهِ. We're living in a time that's so extreme that if it doesn't drive you mad, you're not sane. If it doesn't drive you mad, you're not sane. When Palestinians, if you look at Palestine 100 years ago, Mark Twain wrote a book about his travels. He went to Palestine. He had some racist remarks. It was par for his day. But basically, he wasn't afraid of Palestinians. He felt very comfortable going to the Holy Lands. You read Gertrude Bell and her experiences. When Gertrude Bell went to visit the Ottoman Bey in Baghdad, she talked about the fact how she marveled that she could just walk in and sit down with the ruler. What happened? What has happened to our world? It wasn't that long ago that you could go into the majlis of the kings of Saudi Arabia. Anybody. You could go into the majalis of the rulers in the Muslim world. Just go in and sit down with them. You could bring your complaints to them. This was the world that people lived in not that long ago. In the United States of America, when Andrew Jackson won the presidency, he opened up the White House. Anybody could come in. They completely trashed the place. It was the last time they did it. But that was America, because Andrew Jackson was the people's president. He was a true Democrat. He was also a terrible, killed a lot of Native Americans, and he's got some blemishes. But he was a human living at a time when it's hard to judge people based on the time they live in. I mean, it's easy for us to condemn people now for things that they did in the past, but those were the norms of their societies. Thank God we're beyond those norms. We have a problem in this country. One of the major problems in the United States of America today is the economy. That's what they say. It's the economy, stupid. What they talk about is the problem is entitlements. It's all this welfare. No, there's only one problem with the American economy. It is a war-based economy. It is spending almost all of our budget in Washington is going to the military-industrial complex, and until that stops, nothing is going to change in this country. They don't want to deal with the fact that the budgets that the Pentagon gets could completely rebuild the entire planet. We could have, in Mauritania, the main street in Mauritania is John F. Kennedy Boulevard. You know why the Mauritanians say John F. Kennedy Boulevard? Because he used to send wheat to the Mauritanians. If you ask an old Mauritanian who lived at that time, who was John Kennedy? من كان يحيى Kennedy? He'll say, هذا رجل صالح من الأمريكان كان يطعم الفقراء والمساكين. A good man from the Americans. He used to feed poor people. When Hillary Clinton asked Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya in Qatar, what can we do to improve America's, how people view us abroad? Sheikh Abdullah says, feed people. أطعموا الطعام. Don't drop bombs on them. It won't make you any friends. And they won't even be frenemies. Really, don't drop bombs on people. Afghanistan is one of the poorest countries in the world today. If you read Roland Michaud, this extraordinary French photographer, and his wife, in the 1960s, they lived in Afghanistan. It was one of the most beautiful places in the world. They fell in love with it and its people. And you can look at the pictures of beauty. Afghanis used to plant gardens. They loved flowers. Every Afghani had a flower garden in his house. Many pictures of Afghanis he picked showing them smelling flowers. They used to fly kites. They love kites, Afghani people. They would go and fly kites. They had picnics. In this country, they say these are terrorists. How did they become terrorists? Those among them who are terrorizing, how did they become terrorists? Over a decade of war, Russia killed at least 1.5 million Afghanis. Russians lost about 13,000 people. We don't know how many we've killed, but today we're mourning the dead of New York. And it was said earlier, we have to remind the American people of the dead of Baghdad, of the dead of Kabul, and also of the danger of the imminent death of people in Tehran, of people in Qom, of people in Tabriz, for being nothing other than simple people who are trying to live their lives in peace and security, and because of the failure of political people, Their lives are endangered and threatened. This is the reality. We cannot allow the incompetence of these political leaders to get you and I, Zayd and Amr, John and Abdullah, killing each other. This has to stop as a project in the human condition. Because the only people that benefit by this, Karen Armstrong was saying the fact that the people that support this program to create more peace in the world are the businessmen, because businessmen don't like war. Businessmen don't like war unless they're in the business of war. Then they love war. Then they love war. There are people here that love war because it's an exciting time for them. They make a lot of money off the blood of people. Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya said the Arab Spring was watered with blood. This is what's going on. Innocent people being killed, whether it's in New York, Baghdad, wherever it is, Washington, D.C., it's unacceptable. And as a human community, if we don't begin to recognize that we have to reestablish and reassert ourselves as individuals that have rights, to have good governance, to have people that are looking out for our best interests, because these people in power today are not looking out for our best interests. And let me give you one example. In an extraordinary study called the China Study of Nutrition, 20 years with top experts from Princeton, from Oxford, that determined that most of the diseases that are happening in the United States of America are directly related to the diets of the American people, and yet Americans are lied to, that they need milk, that they need meat, that they need all these things. Fat and sugar, if you give it to rats, they will die because they can't stop consuming it. Umar ibn al-Khattab in the Muwatta of Imam Malik said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَاللَّحْمِ فَإِنَّ لَهُ الضَّرَاوَةَ كَالضَّرَاوَةِ الْخَمَرِ. Beware of meat because it has the addiction of wine. You can become addicted to meat. It's harmful for you if you consume too much meat. This is all proven. But when Oprah Winfrey, after reading about this, announces it on national television that she doesn't want to eat beef anymore, the cattle lobby sues her. The pyramid of food that you see, this pyramid that you see of food, was actually restructured after the dairy and meat lobby said, no, you're going to harm our economy. And so science is subjugated to greed. You see, this is the problem. When we have most of our scientists in this country working in defense industries, instead of trying to find cures for cancer, they're trying to find better ways to kill people. And when they had a problem when they were thinking about Saudi Arabia, and if we have to ever use nuclear weapons on these places, we're going to destroy all the oil infrastructure. And so they had American scientists, good people that go to church on Sunday most likely, PhDs from the best universities. So they developed the neutron bomb that kills all the people and leaves the infrastructure standing. This is the type of madness that we're living in. This is unacceptable as a human condition. When the #1 industry on this planet is tobacco, alcohol, and narcotics, and #2, a close rival, is weapons, something is wrong with the human project. Something is seriously wrong with the human project. There are two questions to ask. Why do we need all these weapons? When most of us, I don't have any problem with you, you don't have any problem with me. If you want to know why people get aggressive against you, disrespect them. In the ghettos in Washington, D.C., there's people that carry around guns. You know what they really want? They want respect. Because if you pull out a gun, you suddenly have an incredible amount of respect coming from the person on the other end. He respects you. And that's the level that these people have fallen to, because they feel so disrespected that they have to carry around, they have to look at you like, what you looking at? What are you looking at? Because they think you're looking at them with contempt. They think you're looking at them without any respect. That's what the African American in the inner cities in the United States feels. He wants respect. She wants respect. And it's not offered. And now because Obama is president, suddenly it's all over. Racism, hey man, we're beyond that. Tell the Tea Party that. You know, tell the white supremacists that. And let me tell you about the Tea Party, because I read the Tea Party's manifesto, and I agreed with probably about 80% of that book. I'm not exaggerating. I read their manifesto. People just say, oh, Tea Party, Tea Party. They never read what they actually have to say. You should actually read what they have to say. A lot of their complaints are very justified. But the Tea Party is, even though there's some African Americans in the Tea Party, undeniably, the Tea Party is largely a Norman Rockwell America that doesn't exist anymore. These people have seen a change in the demographics of this country. They've seen a Kenya Luo tribesman become the president of the United States of America. He could not get elected in Kenya because Luo people can't get elected to high political offices. His father was a failure because he got some of the highest degrees in this country. When he got back to Kenya, because of the tribalism in his country, he was not able to advance. And yet his son could become president of the United States. You see, these aspects of America are very troubling to certain Americans. They're troubling to them. But as somebody who has Irish American ancestry, welcome to America. It's part of the negotiating process. Because my grandfather changed his name from O'Hanson to Hanson. Because H-E-N-S-O-N is also an Anglo-Saxon name. And it's a Swedish name. And John Hanson was the first president of the Continental Congress. So he changed his name. My Greek grandfather, Georgiopoulos, changed his name to George. He was light-skinned. He used to tell people he was French. It's not that long ago. These are the stories that I grew up with. But Greeks now, they have Greek Day, Kiss Me, I'm Greek, the big fat Greek wedding. Everybody loves Greeks in America now. It wasn't always like that. They were greasers. Seriously, they were greasers. John Esposito could go on all night telling you about the Italian Americans, and they're still struggling with the Sopranos. They're still struggling with that stereotype. I mean, when I listen to John, I love John, he's brilliant, he's great, but I keep hearing the Mafia Don. Make him an offer he can't refuse. And to end on the Mafia Don, America is in danger of becoming a Mafia Don. This is not the America that I grew up in. When Dick Cheney can go around this country selling his book, and people aren't literally spitting on him for what he did to this country. I'm serious. And I'm going to make a distinction for all of you right now. If people say I'm anti-government, that's a lie. Because I've studied the American system of government. In America, we differentiate between government and administration. The government is the Constitution of the United States, it's the Congress, it's the Senate, it's a judiciary system. We have checks and balances that are made to protect we the people. But administrations can manipulate, can abuse, can do things that are wrong. And the only way that we can change that in this system of civil governments is by voting in different people. And I'm hoping that that's still a possibility, to see a real change in this country. But this country is polarized, it's in a very precarious situation, and the economy is incredibly fragile. It is incredibly fragile. Many of the jobs that are gone will never come back again. Americans are going to have to think of new ways of making livelihoods. They're going to have to go back to the creativity of the 19th century. It's a new America, and Muslims are part of that America. We've been here from the beginning. We're not going anywhere. We're here to stay, and Americans in this country, and I really mean this, we're part of the family. We're part of the intellectual family of European and American intellectual tradition. They use Arabic numerals when they learn their mathematics, just to remind them, if they don't know, where those numerals came from. They came from Spain, via Morocco, via Egypt, via Iraq, via India. That's how they came. When they look up at the night sky, they see Betelgeuse, Ibn al-Jawza. They see Dabaran, Ad-Dabaran. They see Al-Tayr, At-Tayr. they see the remnants of Muslim discoveries. When they study astronomy in American universities, they learn Arabic names to think about those stars because we are part of the intellectual tradition. When they study, my son is studying algebra right now. Al-Jabr wal-Muqabala. It's forced upon them. The words are there to remind those who know and so that we can show others who don't know. We're part of the family. We're part of the intellectual, spiritual, emotional, physical, psychological fabric of human existence. We are 1/4 of this planet and we're not going anywhere. Zbigniew Brzezinski said, it's easier to kill 1 million people today than to control 1 million people. In the past, it was easier to control 1 million people than to kill 1 million people. If having to kill 1 million people is the only way, we should end the human project right now. Drink the Kool-Aid, get it over with. This is totally, completely unacceptable. Stop thinking about controlling people. That's the problem. Learn how to work with one another. Ta'awanu 'alal birri wa taqwa. Come together. That verse was about all of us coming together. That verse was revealed about the people of Mecca who weren't Muslims. Work together in what's good. Ta'awanu 'alal birri wa taqwa. Work together. This is what we have to do as a people. We have incredible challenges, but this country is a creative country. It has risen to the occasion many times before, and I'm hoping, because hope springs eternal. Hope is a bird with feathers that perches in the soul. I'm a hopeful person. I've got 5 kids to make me extremely hopeful. This is my country. I love this country. It's my home. I love the hills around the Bay Area that I grew up with. I love Muir Woods. I love the redwood forests. I love the Sierra Madre that I went to as a child and camped with my family. These are the places that I grew up with. When the Prophet ﷺ left Mecca and he met, when he got to Medina, there was a man who came, Usayl al-Ghifari, and he said to the Prophet ﷺ said, Kayfa ahidta Mekkata? How did you find Mecca? And he said, oh, the valley has been filled with flowers, thumamuha. And he said, and all of the sidr trees were blossoming. And I left, the water was flowing. And he began to describe the physical. He didn't say the Kaaba, oh, mashallah, taraktu al-Kaaba. No, he described the physicality of the place that the Prophet ﷺ grew up with as a child. And the Prophet began to weep and he said, Kuf anka, hasbuka, laqad shawwaqtani. Don't, please stop. It's enough. You have made me yearn for my home. He was yearning for the flowers of Mecca, not just for the Kaaba. He was yearning for the trees of Mecca that he shaded under as a child. Everybody loves the place they grew up in. Hubb al-watan min al-iman. It's part of human condition. It's not a hadith, but it's a basic fitrah statement. So this is our country. All of you are here with every right, unless there's some illegal immigrants in the hall. Report yourself immediately to Homeland Security. And for those people who came here who are going to report back to your, whoever that you report back to, because there's private enterprise as well as public, I would just say this. Imam Zayd, I've known Imam Zayd for many years now. Imam Zayd, the lies that they tell about this man just really bother me. You know, these right-wing people, they just recently wrote an article about him. Imam Zayd grew up in very difficult conditions, but like many honorable African Americans, he joined the United States Air Force to get out of a certain situation. He served honorably. Unlike all these chicken hawks, Dick Cheney got 6 deferrals, right? Seriously. Unlike these chicken hawks that talk about, oh, patriotism and this, they've never served this country. They've served themselves. They've served themselves. And He spearheaded this event because he wants to see the best for humanity. He's a universal man, and he loves humanity. And that's what this was about, coming together to commune with one another, to share thoughts, to be together on a day before a very sad day in American history. But I want all of us to remember the evil that came out of the evil that occurred on September 11th as well. Remember all the dead Iraqis. Remember all the dead civilians in Afghanistan. Remember those people, because they're nameless people. We've got now a memorial with all the names of the people that died in New York and in Washington. Their names are known, but we'll never know the names. When I read the New York Times, it said 6 civilians were killed yesterday in Afghanistan. They don't say Zainab, Ghulam, or Bibi, Mujaddidi, or they don't give the names. They're just nameless people. Nameless people. They're not nameless with God. Assalamu alaikum.
I am pleased to reintroduce Tariq Subhani. As you heard from Imam Zaid, Mr. Subhani is president of United for Change and the chairman of this event. He is an architect by profession and has worked for some of the top architectural firms in the country. He is a founding member of Mecca Muslim Education and Convert Center of America and served as the vice president and director of marketing. Mr. Subhani also served for 4 years as a board member of the Strasbourg Islamic Center, the last 2 years as president. He currently teaches Islamic studies for adults at the center. For over 15 years, he has been involved with faith-based initiatives at the grassroots level.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasul Kareem. I just wanted to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It was an incredible, incredible day, incredible series of talks. Just by a show of claps, how many people thought this was a great day? Inshallah. Alhamdulillah. And it was all possible due to our volunteers. There was an army of volunteers that's behind this whole thing that put it together, all the great speakers that were here. So once again, I want to thank the speakers, thank the volunteers, and thank all of you for coming. For our final piece, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to call all the speakers up to the stage for a curtain call. And then secondly, we're going to read Karen Armstrong's Charter of Compassion. And after that, Imam Shibli is going to give the closing dua. So inshallah, in alphabetical order, I just want to call all the speakers. Anya Cordell. Dr. Altaf Hussain. Dr. John Esposito, who actually had to leave. Dr. Merve Kavekchi Islam. Come on up. Come on, line up. Dr. Sherman Jackson. Dr. Tariq Ramadan. He actually had to catch a flight, so he had to leave. Dr. Yasser Qadi. Imam Muhammad Majid. The living legend, Imam Siraj Wahaj. And everybody loves him, that's correct. Alhamdulillah. Imam Sayyid Hassan Al-Kazwini. Come on, people, give them some love, inshallah, come on. I know it's been a long day, but this is an all-star game here, so inshallah. Imam Zaid Shakir. Yes. Who is also the chairman of United for Change. Karen Armstrong, who actually was here just up until recently, but she had to leave. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. Alhamdulillah. Sheikh Muhammad Ninawi. Sheikh Muhammad here still? Imam Majid. Come on up, Sheikh Ninawi. Come on, everybody, inshallah, give him a hand. Alhamdulillah. Hadia Mubarak, who is our moderator from the first panel. Is Hadia still here? Brother Amadou Shakur, who is our moderator for the second panel. Brother Amadou, alhamdulillah. Hafiz Usama Saleh, who did the Quran recitation and led us in Salah. Imam Shibli, of course. And Sheikh Alauddin Al-Bakri, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, this is the great list of speakers we have here, inshallah. One more time, a round of applause, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Inshallah, next we're going to read the Charter of Compassion, which was written by Karen Armstrong. Anya Cordell is going to do the first reading. Dr. Merve is going to do the second reading. Inshallah, I'll do the third reading. And fourth reading will be Karen Armstrong, but now it's going to be Dr. Yasser Qadi. These are short paragraphs that we'll just read really fast, and then I'll give it to you for Imam Shibli's closing dua, inshallah. So Anya Cordell, please.
The principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious, ethical, and spiritual traditions, calling us always to treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves. Compassion impels us to work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our fellow creatures, to dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and put another there, and to honor the inviolable sanctity of every single human being, treating everybody without exception with absolute justice, equity, and respect.
It is also necessary in both public and private life to refrain consistently and empathetically from inflicting pain, to act or speak violently out of spite, chauvinism, or self-interest, to impoverish, exploit, or deny basic rights to anybody, and to incite hatred by denigrating others, even our enemies, is a denial of our common humanity. We acknowledge that we have failed to live compassionately and that some have even increased the sum of human misery in the name of religion.
Paragraph 3, we therefore call upon all men and women to restore compassion to the center of morality and religion, to return to the ancient principle that any interpretation of Scripture that breeds violence, hatred, or disdain is illegitimate, to ensure that youth are given accurate and respectful information about other traditions, religions, and cultures, to encourage a positive appreciation of cultural and religious diversity, to cultivate an informed empathy with the suffering of all human beings, even those regarded as enemies.
We urgently need to make compassion a clear, luminous, and dynamic force in our polarized world. Rooted in a principled determination to transcend selfishness, compassion can break down political, dogmatic, ideological, and religious boundaries. Born of our deep interdependence, compassion is essential to human relationships and to a fulfilled humanity. It is the path to enlightenment and indispensable to the creation of a just economy and a peaceful global community.
Jazakallah khair. I apologize, I forgot to introduce Brother Rayaz Bunyan, who was here earlier and received an award for his courage. So I apologize, Rayaz. Alhamdulillah. Now I'm going to introduce Imam Shibli. He is the Imam of Islamic Society of Central Jersey, home of the Nurul Iman Islamic School. Thank you, Imam Shibli, for coming down, and he brought an entire bus with him from Jersey. So he's going to give the closing dua. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for coming, Imam.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. I say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. When I read the program of today, I find there is no time was put neither next to my name or under my name or above my name, which means I'm going to hold you in the prayer from now till Salat al-Fajr. Two short notes from Tall Imam. The note of Brother Tariq Ramadan about an imam or a scholar want the people to worship him instead to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I misquoted, I apologize. Really, the entire body behind me, and allowed me to turn my face to all of them, I testify in Washington, D.C., none of them will allow that to happen in United States, which means those scholars, male and female, they are not in that position. And I say, Brother Tariq Ramadan, Jazallah Khair, was talking about his experience overseas. Second note, before the prayer, I love America, but tonight I say I love America more after I heard the last presentation from my brother in Islam, Brother Hamza Yusuf. And the reason I say this, you know there are many shapes of turban on the stage. And Imam Hamza Yusuf did not bring his turban with him, which I met him in California a couple months ago. Those kind of turban, you will never see them together except in United States. Where in the world you can see Christians and Jews and Muslims, Muslim, not Muslims, spend the whole day from Salat al-Fajr till Salat al-Fajr and no bloodshed, alhamdulillah, in this hall. This is the America which we like to say alhamdulillah, and this is what I like to start our prayer tonight with the word thanks to Az-Zaytuna, to all the volunteers, to all of you by staying here up till this minute. Wa jazakumullahu anna khair. And let us pray together to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by saying, Oh Allah, you are our Lord, you are our Creator, you are the one fashioning all of us with the shape, you are the one who provide us with the little knowledge, you are the one who brought us here, if we were born here or we came here. Oh Allah, bless this gathering. Oh Allah, bless Az-Zaytuna Institution, College. Oh Allah, bless all the scholars, Muslim and non-Muslim, who are standing here in this podium, in this stage. Oh Allah, guide all of us to the straight path, As-Sirat al-Mustaqim. Oh Allah, bless the soul of all the human beings who pass away. Some of them we know and some of them we don't. Oh Allah, you know what happened 10 years ago in this country. Oh Allah, we pray to you not to allow this incident to happen, not only in the United States, but in any other part of the world. Oh Allah, protect the life of the human being. Oh Allah, protect us as a Muslim and as a non-Muslim. And oh Allah, help us to live the Islam in our daily life, weekly life, monthly life, till we meet you on the day of judgment. Let us pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala together by saying, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. اللهم يا ربنا بارك لنا في جمعنا هذا. اللهم يا ربنا بارك لنا في جمعنا هذا. اللهم يا ربنا بارك لنا في جمعنا هذا. اللهم يا ربنا زدنا ولا تنقصنا، وأعطنا ولا تحرمنا، وأكرمنا ولا تهنا، وانصرنا ولا تنصر علينا يا رب العالمين. اللهم يا ربنا بارك في جهود القائمين على الزيتونة. اللهم يا ربنا بارك فيهم ذكورا وإناثا. اللهم يا ربنا بارك في الأساتذة، وبارك في الطلاب، وبارك في العاملين، وبارك في كل من ساهم في هذا المؤتمر يا رب العالمين. اللهم يا ربنا بارك في هذا الحضور. اللهم يا ربنا احفظنا من بين أيدينا، واحفظنا من خلفنا، واحفظنا من فوقنا، واحفظنا من تحتنا، وكن ولينا في الدنيا والآخرة يا رب العالمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم، وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. My request to the scholars, my teacher behind me as a Muslim, and all of you as an audience, inshallah ta'ala, with loudly voice as much as you can to show your gratitude and your thank to Allah, sunnah to do it. Let us, all of us in one voice, recite Surah Al-Asr before we leave the stage and before we leave Washington, and may Allah protect all of us, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العظيم. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Don't forget to get your book. And this is United for Change program, not Zaytuna. But Zaytuna was the financial sponsor. Drop your envelopes in the box, on the table on the way out. Sign the letters, the 3 letters. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, everybody, for coming out. It was a great event, great day. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Also, we have DVDs for the event today. If somebody wants to get them from the Zaytuna booth, they can get them, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
In Dallas.